Hello YouTube, I'm Jack Clark, the Eager Musketeer, coming to you with yet another video. Now, today I'm going to talk about netdecking and innovation, as it's known. Because I think the entire community, anybody who plays Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, kind of has the wrong view on netdecking and to a lesser extent, innovation. Now, everyone knows what netdecking is. Now, netdecking, for those of you who are uninitiated, unaware, netdecking is when you copy someone else's deck and you use it. So, for example, someone tops with an Inzektor deck list, and you're like, oh, I want to play Inzektors because they're winning, or whatever reason you may have, and then you copy their deck list so you have a basis for your own deck, and then, of course, you go from there. Now, people don't like deck deckers, because, of course, when a deck is tried and proved to win, of course in a tournament setting, which is where most net decks come from, then people kind of get annoyed because the kind of influx of tournament players that start running said decks, like for example Dino Rabbit. A Dino Rabbit deck doesn't really differ from many others. Of course, there may be some techs every so often, but Dino Rabbit decks are pretty standard as it goes. So, of course, a whole load of net deckers that, in regards to Dino Rabbit, can be quite annoying for some people. So, of course, this lack of creativity, so to speak, does annoy a lot of people. So, I kind of understand that. However, I do think, obviously, netdecking is not something that should be hated, because I have talked to some people who, of course, okay, so, people who want to netdeck. I know a couple of people who have wanted to make some of the more kind of competitively viable decks, and of course have immediately not wanted to netdeck. I know somebody who's wanted to make Hieratics and started from scratch. Of course, not wanting to netdeck because, well, it's some kind of a matter of pride, or some matter of dignity, or something stupid like that. But I think netdecking has a very valuable place within the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, simply as a learning tool. And this is obvious, though. This should be very obvious. My friend wants to use, I don't know, my friend wants to use wind-ups or something, and he doesn't know how to make wind-ups. He wants to use them, and he wants to win with them. It's perfectly reasonable that he goes to a tournament deck list, and he copies it, and then, of course, plays with the deck. Once he gets used to it, he then can add his own stuff that he's more comfortable, and it's more in keeping with his own play style. So this whole kind of attitude of, oh, netdeckers is fucking shit, man, lack of creativity, is this bullshit, and blah, 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 I just don't agree with it, and I think it's shit. Of course not. If I wanted to play, heaven forbid, Inzektors, which I don't anymore, obviously, since I traded all my Hornets, then if I would want to do, I would, of course, do the most logical thing. I want to win with Inzektors, so look up a deck list that uses Inzektors, copy said deck list, practice with the deck, and then make changes to the deck if and where I see it necessary to be more in keeping with the way I play. It makes perfect sense, and I really struggle to understand people who don't like it as a matter of pride or dignity or a lack of creativity, because when it comes to this game, as the facade that this game has is that it's a creative game. And of course, it's the whole kind of, they've all got pictures, this artwork, it's got all these combinations you could do with each other, and of course, infinite combos, and techniques you could do with the decks, and cards. But really, if you think about it, this is really just a game of formulas and luck. So, of course, some cards interact with other cards in certain ways, so ideally and obviously you should be able to create certain formulas and combos which are ideal and the best. I mean, this is why we see the same deck topping at tournaments across the world. So of course we see Dino Rabbit topping, and there's not really much deviation between Dino Rabbit decks. So yes, that makes perfect sense, because that's the formula. Of course, and the same applies to a lot of other stuff. It's why a lot of other stuff isn't competitive. And it makes perfect sense for people to copy said formula, and for people to adapt the formula to their own style. It really does get me quite angry and quite annoyed when people just dismiss netdecking as a terrible, like people saying that netdecking is the worst part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And people who just can't think for themselves. But to be fair, it's not that people can't think for themselves. They very well can do. It's just they don't need to. And of course, they make changes if and when they're necessary. And if a person netdecks and they don't make any changes, then so what? Someone's using a deck that they like, and yeah, can't really fault them on them. But yes, and when it comes to innovation, of course, people will say that net decking is bad because people won't use, for example, I use very low tier decks, so to speak. So, of course, I use Watts, I use Evols, Evols are apparently getting much, much better, and apparently a tier 1, which I'm skeptical on. And Lightsworn, I run Aliens, I run Fabled, I run a lot of stuff, but not stuff that you would think is very competitive. So I don't quite like running competitive stuff, so to speak, because of course it's not as interesting. Like I said, same formulas are used over and over again, and it can be boring. So I like to. So that's the whole kind of where innovation comes in, and where people will talk about interesting combos that can combat top tier decks. Because obviously, when it comes to formulas, when it comes to the top tier decks, I mean, then of course these formulas they account for the top tiers. So, of course, that's where the side deck comes into. Of course, when you create a side deck, you try and cover every possible situation that you think you may encounter. So, when you think you may encounter an Injector deck, or a Wind-Up deck, or a Dino Rabbit deck, or a Dark World deck, or whatever, you will alter your main deck and your side deck appropriately so you can better fight against them. So, rogue decks, that top tournaments, of course, win because they take advantage of that. So they are not covered by these formulaic decks which have covered other things, but they haven't covered them. So they take advantage of that, and they can go for their weaknesses and can fight full force because they can't counter them as effectively as if they were an Insector or a Dino Rabbit person. So for example, like, my opponent's got a Lagia on the field. Now, a lot of people would struggle with that because they don't want to minus themselves. But for me, a simple thing would be to activate the effect of Fabled Chawa in my hand, discarding the Fabled Catsif. My play goes through as completely as planned. I special summon Chawa, Catsif destroys Lagia. My opponent can't do anything in response to that. My opponent can't negate the effect of Chawa with Lagia because it's a monster effect and starts a chain. And then Lagia is destroyed with all of its materials still on it. And it's fun. And it's good. Of course, rogue decks are fun. And of course, it's very good. But of course, like I said, formula. Formulas don't just cover the immediately competitive stuff. Formulas cover a whole wide range. It's why they're so good and why they're used over everything else. It's because they can hit a lot of stuff and they're good against a lot of stuff, which is why you don't see as many rogue decks. So yeah, sure, I can discard the Fabled Catsif or the Fabled Chawa, summon Chawa, and then normal summon a Ganesha, and then go for Unicorn, and then control the game from there with the Fabled Unicorn control and whatever. But it's not the most efficient formula for me to implement against something as tried and tested as Dino Rabbit, for example. Although I can win and do well against Dino Rabbit, because, of course, I can use a Fabled deck in a much more proficient manner than someone who can't. Which is where you get back to net deckers. Where another thing about people who hate net decking is the fact that they don't know the deck as well as someone who tried and tested it in the first place. So someone runs Insectors for the first time, they have made the perfect build, and then people will copy them. Who's better, the original or the people who copied them? Evidently, it doesn't matter how much experience those people who copied them will have, they will not be as good as the person who created it originally because they know the deck inside and out. I mean, I can win against a lot of top tier decks with... You give me a Watt deck, and I can fuck you up. But someone else who would to copy to my deck, for example, because of course I use many individual texts and cards and a very different approach to Watts than a lot of other people who even know what to do with Watts, then someone else may not do very well with it because, well, they can't use it as proficiently as I can. Not to toot my own horn, but that's the case. So of course, I talked a lot of gibberish in this video, Christ. So, in conclusion, net decking is a very good and very positive part of this game. It allows people to learn and to evolve and to use decks which people are using. Oh, you've got a cool deck. Can I use your deck list? And I will try it myself. It's good. Of course, you've got the bad side where people just kind of take that to their advantage and just kind of, yeah, I'm going to use this deck. Do you know how it works? Well, you summon Rabbit and you summon Carpazours and you go for Lagia, right? And that's all they know. But yes, I still agree that net decking is still a good thing. People should not view it as such a bad thing, and you should not think of it as a matter of pride or dignity that you don't net deck because you don't net deck, and I can't do that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And of course, innovation, people will innovate, and you need to think of this less as creative. Don't use the term creative in Yu-Gi-Oh! Of course, you can do, some of it does apply, but think of it more in the terms of a formula, because there are cards out there, they work together well, and certain combinations of cards work better against some combinations of other cards. That's how the game works. My 40 cards will be better than your 40 cards for whatever reason, so I'll have a better matchup against you. It doesn't mean that I'm being less or more creative, or you're being less or more creative, or innovative, or whatever. It's just a matter of life. It's a matter of fact. Some people are better than other people. Be it cards or by people and the world. So that's a thought to take with you. So yes, I've talked for over 10 minutes. Oh dear. Very sorry for that. But of course, I'm Jack Clark, the Eager Musketeer. More videos out too soon. If you be interested in anything that I've talked about in today's video, if you have any points or arguments or thoughts or whatever you want to, or ideas you want to bring up, and put those in the comments down below. I really would like to hear everyone's opinions on net decking, innovation and the like. I would like to get some kind of a discussion going, so please put those in the comments down below as a video response. I'm Jack Clark, the Eager Musketeer. More videos out too soon. Goodbye.